morning, good morning, and afternoon. We have people here joining from BC to Nova Scotia, so different timelines in there. And welcome to our early career seminar series named Navigating Job Search and Applications. Today we have three panelists. So the first one is Logan Montgomery, Courtney Henry, and Nathan Becker. And I think that we are going to start with Logan. Do you think that can start today?
Yeah, I'll share my screen here.
Perfect. So in the meantime, Dr. Logan Montgomery is a medical physicist at Nova Scotia Health in Halifax. He completed his master in 2016 and his PhD in 2021 in medical physics at McGill University. Then he did a COMP accredited residency in radiation oncology physics at the Kingston Health Science Center. In 2024, he obtained his MCPP certification in radiation oncology physics. And then at the Nova Scotia Health, he is a member of the adaptive team ethos platform, surface guiding team, and stereotactic team. He co-teaches the radiation biology course in medical physics radio program at Dalhousie University, and his research interests focus on dosimetry and data-driven quality improvement in radiation oncology. So that being said, thank you, Logan, for joining us today.
Thanks, Paula, and thanks very much for the introduction and for the invitation to do this. So, I just titled my talk something, I don't know, slightly whimsical, Musings on the Medical Physics Job Search. My disclaimer is that I'm just a humble physicist. I don't pretend to be an expert on any of this. This is just sort of my experience and a few things that work for me that may or may not work for you, but I hope maybe there's something that you take away that might prove useful. Already had a nice introduction, so we'll button through this. But yeah, did my grad school at McGill. In 2021, started a residency in Kingston in radiation oncology physics. And then in 2023, became a full-time physicist here in Halifax. Now, I actually interviewed for 4 physicist positions at that time, just to give you some context of what my level of experience with that is. And maybe the only really relevant thing to say about that is that my experience was that everywhere has a different process. So like what the interviews are in terms of whether it's a single interview, whether you're doing multiple rounds of interviews, whether you're asked to give a presentation on some topic like a residency project, all of it was kind of fair game, and it just kind of depended on the nature of the department and the hiring committee that was involved. So I guess just sort of expect not the unexpected, but expect that you'll have quite a variety of flavors as you enter into the interviews. The rest of my talk is just a few slides actually, and on each slide I just have a specific tip, and I've cutely put them all as starting with B. So I have 3 Bs that we'll talk about here. The first one is be prepared to be dynamic, which is kind of an oxymoron, I guess, but I think it will make sense. And what I mean by that is prepare for a broad range of interview questions, but you can only prepare so much too. But generally, there's sort of common themes that everyone will generally dance around. And in case you're so inclined, I have a list of questions that I just pulled from various sources and tweaked a bit when I was going through this process. So there's a Google Drive link here, just it's not a very sophisticated thing. It's just a list of questions that I prepared answers to. The only thing I'll say is that I have had some positive feedback from a couple other residents who have gone through after my time that said that they found that there was a lot of common ground with interview questions in what I have listed here. But please don't take it as exhaustive. It's just my take. I have the questions grouped into three categories that I think you'll find are relatively common. Or the first is questions to assess professional attributes. So in a, I don't know, not a generous context, you could maybe see these as questions that could be asked for any type of job, not necessarily in medical physics. But that doesn't mean that they're not relevant to our field or that you can't make it relevant to medical physics. So these are questions like trying to delve at some professional attribute or characteristic. So like organization skills. How do you organize your time and tasks so that you're productive and efficient? Or how introspective are you? Describe a time where you learned from a mistake. So I've tried to frame these questions in the light of these specific attributes that might be of interest, acknowledging the fact that the questions themselves are going to vary significantly, but generally there's common themes that you can sort of pull on regardless of the setting. And then there's some technical and profession specific questions. My experience was that these are generally not like quite the same as a residency exam or professional exam type of question. They're a little bit more like high level clinical service oriented, but you might see things like describe a time when you identified a potential safety issue. What did you do, or what would you do? What would you do? What's your perspective on repetitive tasks? You can see some other examples on that document if you're interested. And then some more like visionary or forward-facing type questions. So like share your short-term and long-term professional goals, more personal, but then more about the field too. So like what's the role of a clinical medical physicist? How do you think that role will change over time? Again, not meant to be exhaustive, but you'll probably be, if you prepare answers to those questions, you'll probably set yourself up for a lot of good material that you can pull from when you're actually in an interview, in my experience. My second tip is be specific where you can be. So think about what the interviewer is looking for. And to that end, I like to demonstrate via example when possible. I think it's more memorable than just sort of talking in the abstract. I think it's helpful if you can reference something that you've done specifically, where appropriate, obviously. And you have lots of professional and residency experience that you can draw upon. Think big picture in terms of a team and multidisciplinary context. Of course, always keep safety and structure in mind. And certainly be honest about what you know and what you don't know. Like, don't try and fudge your way through something if you don't know, but you can say, here's the context for what my best guess would be, or in my experience, this is what I would do based on whatever. So pulling an example question from the previous slide, like how do you organize your time and tasks so that you're productive and efficient? I like to sort of think of a two-pronged answer. Part A would be sort of like your general framework of how you answer or how you go about that. And then part B is maybe a specific example where you did that in action. So maybe for this question, maybe you make use of some strategy or tools in general. Like, do you sort of keep in your mind some prioritization matrix where is a task urgent versus non-urgent? Is it important versus non-important? And then how does that dictate how you handle it? And then provide an example of when you actually did that. So as a resident, you have lots of things going on. You have your project, you have your didactic learning, shadowing. How did you manage all those things when you were a resident? I will put in a caveat here. Just be careful not to ramble. I feel like I don't have any specific advice on how to achieve that other than like just be time conscious, I guess. But when you're giving an interview answer, it's a fine line between giving enough context and sort of just going on and on. Like, be aware of how much time you have and the likely number of questions you're going to be asked. Last tip, which is maybe a bit of a corny one, but I think there's a few useful things to point out, is be yourself. So obviously be professional, but I don't think you should present yourself as something that you aren't. And a tip that was given to me when I was going through this process was recognize that you might not be the best fit for every job. Like some workplace might be looking for someone with a lot of experience or a particular kind of experience that you might not have coming out of residency. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But other jobs will be looking for someone new or someone with a fresh set of eyes on things. Like just I guess don't be crushed if a place doesn't offer you a job because maybe you just weren't the right fit for what they were looking for. And it's nothing to do with you. That said, I think it is a very favorable job market. And so you should consider whether each place is the right fit for you. So sort of the contrary to what I just said. Um, Make sure that you think it's the right fit for what you want. One way you can do that is ask to meet with team members or to do a site visit if that's not already part of the plan. I don't think that's a bad thing to ask for. I think that's very reasonable and can help really inform your decision. Before your interview, prepare questions that matter to you and ask them. And consider your job offers carefully. Like you don't necessarily need to jump at the first one. My experience was if someone's interested in you and you have multiple interviews going on, like just be honest about it and say like this is my life situation and just trying to um, figure out all the pieces before you make a big decision. So that's really all I have to say, and that's near the end of my 10 minutes. Before I close, maybe just a few words of reassurance because I don't know if you're anything like me, maybe you're not, and I don't advocate that you be this way, but I felt throughout grad school and residency like I was always putting off big things in life. It's like, oh, I just got to get through this transition moment and then we'll find peace and happiness in life. Being on the other side of it, good things are on the horizon. So if you're the type of person that's waiting to get that dog or have a family or whatever, know that it's coming, and I feel like you're nearly there. So anyway, that's it. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Logan. That was excellent. I think that our idea is that then Courtney is going to do his talk next, and then we're going to do a questions panel at the end of the talk.
Great.
Perfect. Okay, so in the meantime, I'm going to do his introduction. So Dr. Courtney Henry is a nuclear medical physicist with Nova Scotia Health and an assistant professor in the Department of Diagnostic Radiology at Dalhousie University. He earned his PhD in medical physics from Dalhousie University, and his research centered on CT-based dosimetry following yttrium-90 radioembolization. He subsequently completed a postdoc fellowship in imaging physics at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, working closely with multidisciplinary clinical team to advance PET-CT and SPECT-CT based dosimetry following yttrium-90 radioembolizations. Before that, he received his bachelor degree with honor in physics from the University of King's College and master degree in medical physics from the University of Sydney. In his current role, he teaches graduate and postgraduate courses in medical physics and nuclear medicine and is actively involved in trainee and mentorship. His research focuses in quantitative nuclear medicine, imaging, and patient-specific radiation dosimetry, with particular emphasis on translational applications in liver cancer therapy. Dr. Henry has published extensively in leading journals as his work has received multiple awards in international scientific meetings, including the European Association for Nuclear Medicine Springer Award to the best research paper in AGN-MMI physics, as well as the best physics presentation at the American Association of Physicists in Medicine. In medicine annual meeting. Okay, so with that, I'll let you speak.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. And of course, for the invite. It's great to be here. My scenario is quite unique relative to most. I did not, in fact, do a residency. Instead, as you mentioned, I did a postdoc and then went right into my professional career. So hopefully my unique experience can shed some light on what you guys might choose to do. Just a brief outline, slide or two on my background, the job search application process, interview prep, how to stand out, lessons I've learned, and a few comments on my return of service agreement. So this all started for me in Halifax in 2009 at the University of King's College, where I pursued a physics degree. Following that, I took a year off, which I highly recommend, in order to sort of prioritize and figure out what next steps I wanted to take. And it was during that period that I discovered medical physics. I also had enough of the Halifax winter, as some of you can appreciate. So I decided to travel abroad. I ended up in Sydney, Australia, pursuing my master's degree for 2 years. Now, I applied for funding for a PhD project down there. Unfortunately, I was unsuccessful, so I ended up just cold calling all kinds of nuke med physicists, across the world. I actually ended up back in Halifax, ironically enough, at Dal for a 5-year PhD project. And during that time, I met an individual who I collaborated with closely on my work. And even after the 5-year PhD, you sort of get a bit exhausted with the research. And I swore to myself that, I would not continue the research and do a postdoc, but there I was. It was a really appealing project that he proposed. It was a prestigious institution. So I decided to head down to Texas for the 2-year postdoc. And at that time, my supervisor at Dal was actually retiring. He's the nuke med physicist, or was the nuke med physicist at Nova Scotia Health. And so the chief at the time of the medical physics department offered me the position through a return of service agreement. So as I mentioned, we'll talk about that a bit later. So I ended up coming back to Halifax for the 3rd time, where I became a medical physicist in nuclear medicine. And I also teach in the diagnostic imaging department for the residents and also in the medical physics graduate program. So in the final years of my PhD, I started to ask myself, what do I do next? Most pathways, as you all know, lead to the residency. But if you look at the CAMP website, it states there are only 2 accredited imaging residency programs in Canada that offer a nuke med physics option. So not a whole lot to choose from if you want to stay in Canada. And that's not really surprising, given the list of clinically certified medical physicists. There's 38 in DI and MR combined, only 13 in nuke med physics, and well over 400 for rad-onc. So, the 2 residency programs, that's not too surprising. There's only 2 of them. I thought about pursuing that, but as I said, the fellowship was a really great opportunity, so I decided to take that pathway. And as I said, I was offered a return of service agreement, but let's just assume that wasn't the case. I mean, after the fellowship, you still have to decide what you want to do. Do you want to take a clinical route? Do you want to do solely academia, or even work in industry? So these are some of the questions that we really have to ask ourselves at the end of our student career. Now, what do most people do? This is a table from the CAMP graduate program report from last year. 63% of grads go into residency. Over 99% of those are accepted. 50% of those are radiotherapy. So, not a whole lot for imaging, 13%. And then, less than 10% for non-academic clinical or academia, industry, government, etc. So very few people in these latter fields. So as I said, I chose to pursue the postdoc. with a collaborator who has a lab at MD Anderson, and we knew each other quite well by that time. We had been collaborating closely for 3 to 4 years. So my interview process wasn't very formal. It was more of a conversation. But a few comments I'd like to make nonetheless based on my limited experience. When you're being interviewed, it's super important to be refreshed on all your research, right? Including your publications, presentations, any patents you might have. As I was being interviewed for a postdoctoral fellowship, my questions were largely research-based. So my recommendation is make sure you review a lot of your work. It's easy to write a paper, publish it, and then sort of never look at it again. If you're looking at the postdoc route, make sure you are intimately familiar with all of your previous and ongoing work. Beyond that, I think even though you're the one being interviewed, it's really important, as Logan had mentioned, for you to ask them some questions as well. So what are some expectations in the job? Nuclear medicine's a bit unique. Sometimes radiation safety officers or even the technologists can sort of carry out some of the duties that physicists might typically carry out. So it's important to know exactly what you're getting yourself into. Also, in terms of the equipment and infrastructure, knowing what that is all about is super important. Are you working with Siemens spec scanners, or is it GE PET? What kind of dose calibrators and well counters and survey meters are you working with? Being familiar with the various radiopharmaceutical therapies they might provide, or diagnostic imaging procedures, etc. It's really important to understand what this is all about. And last but not least, workplace vibes. I think you're going to be working with these people for the foreseeable future. You want to know what that department is all about, what the people are like. This is something that's often overlooked, but I also think it's really important. So if there are site visits, then I highly recommend you do that. I was fortunate enough to go spend some time at MD Anderson during my PhD, so I sort of had an idea of what I was getting into. And in the era of Teams, you can learn a lot virtually, but it's really nothing like actually going to the institution and getting a tour and sort of seeing the place for yourself. Standout strategies. I think it's really important during these interviews to emphasize your strengths. So whether that be in the research that you've done, maybe you have a long history of teaching or supervising students, or perhaps your clinical contributions, working with physicians or other professionals and finding ways to improve patient care. So sort of find out what your strength is and really hammer that. And in my opinion, you also want to break this physicist stereotype. So on the right here is a ChatGPT generated image of a physicist. You can see the Albert Einstein hair and the messy chalkboard and the sort of disorganized desk. It looks like he's got some fusion experiment in the snow globe there. I don't think you want to come across as this sort of standard physicist. You want to be unique in who you are. So try to emphasize some of those hobbies and interests that break this mold. Make yourself stand out. And finally, have a personal narrative. Everyone wants to know, why are you in medical physics? What is it that interests you about this field? And furthermore, why the particular institution that you're applying to? What makes that special in your view? Lessons that I've learned along the way, the more the merrier. In my opinion, there's no reason why you shouldn't apply to a wide variety of institutions. There might be some fees or whatnot associated with travel if you decide to visit the institution, but this is a really important decision, really important part of your life. I think it's critical to get a really good view of that horizon and see what's out there. And don't be afraid to leave your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to go to a new place, something that might be strange or uncomfortable to you, something you're not familiar with. I made that decision to go to Australia, not knowing a single person there, or having been in the country before, and those were some of the best years of my life. So it's, don't be afraid to sort of step out of that zone. Another lesson I learned is to maintain professional relationships. This is a big reason why I ended up where I am, because I kept maintain that close friendship with a collaborator I was working with during my PhD. we became quite close, and then he invited me to come down and work in his lab. So that really paid off for me. It doesn't just go for collaborators, right? Previous colleagues or people you worked with in industry, this applies to them as well. For example, I was working with a software engineer out of MIM, and he reached out and offered me a job at my postdoc. Unfortunately, well, for better or worse, I already signed the return of service agreement there. But maintaining that relationship, gave me that opportunity to potentially work in industry. So it's, as I said, maintaining these professional relationships can really pay off. And also think beyond the institution. What's that city going to be like when you get there? Is that something you're going to be interested in? Do you have friends and family that are close? That can be really helpful in challenging times. And the cost of living is something that some people may overlook. I compare that to the salary that you expect to get. This is either going to make your life really, really easy or potentially very challenging in the long run. So I've been alluding to this return of service agreement. When I got to MD Anderson, my previous supervisor and the current nuke med physicist at the time had retired. So Nova Scotia Health offered me 10 grand per year for 2 years during my time at MD Anderson at the postdoc. I had to start the job 2 months after completing the postdoc and have to work at Nova Scotia Health for 3 years. I just finished my second year as of a few days ago. I think these are pretty standard values. That being said, do not be afraid to negotiate when it comes to these return of service agreements, whether that's the total amount of money you get or how much time you take between the two jobs. Having that 2-month period was really great in retrospect. I wish I had a little bit more. After a 5-year PhD and diving right into the 2-year postdoc, I was just sort of mentally exhausted. And I wish I would have taken some more time just to sort of unwind and perhaps go on a nice vacation. Nonetheless, the 3 years that I'm supposed to work for Nova Scotia Health, that's going to go by pretty quick. It feels like I just started and it's already been 2 years. That being said, make sure you plan ahead. You don't want to be stuck in a position if you have some 5-year plan that doesn't account for 3 years at the same institution. Right? Think ahead 5 years, think ahead 10 years. Make sure you have just a rough outline, a rough plan for the foreseeable future. And generally speaking, these return to service agreements are for a pretty short period, on the order of a few years usually. And as I said, that goes by pretty quick. Generally just long enough for you to get used to the place, get familiar with the people, workflows, etc. So I'm really happy that I took this return to service approach. Really excited to be here at Nova Scotia Health. I certainly don't intend to leave here anytime soon. All right, I think I'm at my 10 minutes. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much for joining us. I think that now we are gonna start with Nathan. So Nathan is a little bit different from the rest of our speakers because Nathan is gonna give us a talk from the hiring perspective. In this case, Nathan, do you have slides? Do you think that you can try? Okay.
No,
perfect.
I won't share slides.
Okay, that's good. So I will just give a small introduction. So Dr. Nathan Becker is the regional medical physics leader at BC Cancer at Kelowna, and he is also an adjunct professor at UBC Okanagan. He completed his PhD at the University of Calgary and his residency through the University of Toronto. His work focuses on image-guided radiation therapy, quality control, and automation, with a particular passion for adaptive radiation therapy. In 2023, he led the installation of the Variant Ethos system at BC Cancer Kelowna, which at the time was the first unit of its kind in Canada. And this technology enables daily online adaptive treatments supported by AI-driven tools and brings a new level of precision and personalization for the patient care. So that being said, Nathan, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to chatting with you all. Like I said, I don't have slides. I just want this to be, again, very conversational. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes from my perspective. The thing I'm going to focus on is what I look for in an applicant, how we assess, do the initial pre-screening, how we assess soft skills during the interview, and then at the end, how do we decide between candidates with very similar skill sets? So already I think a lot of the points that I wanted to talk about have been mentioned already. Great overviews from the first two speakers, definitely people who just from a presentation like that, I, as a hiring manager, would say, oh, I would be interested in hiring both of those individuals. So kind of the first topic I'm going to talk about is what I look for in an applicant. And the thing that I think is important here is that what I look for is going to be completely different than what every single other hiring manager looks for. So it really doesn't matter what I'm looking for unless you want to get a job in Kelowna. And it is up to you to figure out if you want to get a job somewhere and you're really targeting a specific location. The interview starts not 2 weeks before your interview, not 6 months before your interview. It starts when you're in your PhD, when you're going to conferences, when you're in your residency, and you hopefully can still get to those conferences. Hopefully now post-COVID, conferences are a huge way for myself personally that I attend. I look to interact with people, and it's really because that kind of environment is my best way. If I'm not going to be able to get someone and assess them for a short-term work placement or a summer studentship or whatever, going to conferences, chatting with people in the hallways, getting to know them, having them ask me and show their initiative, that for me is an extremely important way that I assess people. And it's really hard looking through a list of 15 applicants. If I've never met any of them before, how am I going to differentiate them? And always the ones that I've met who've come out and reached out to me, who've had a side conversation, who we've gone out for dinner at one of the conferences and had conversation about work and their research, yes, but their life and their life goals and what they want to do. And that's for me how I get to assess people outside of the interview, and so many of the decisions are made there as opposed to what happened. So I would really encourage you all, when you go to conferences, if you're targeting a place, reach out to members of that department, to the leads from that department. You need to figure out who's in charge of that hiring process and make that good impression outside of the hiring process. Now, obviously, you can take things too far and you can be the annoying person that's emailing someone regularly and getting on someone's nerves. There's a fine line there. But like I said, every hiring manager is different. Every workplace is completely different. And you need to do that work ahead of time if you are really targeting a specific place. If you don't really care about the place and you just want to get a job somewhere in the GTA, somewhere in the Lower Mainland, if there's multiple institutions, maybe that's a little bit less important, but yeah. So in terms of what I look for, I will tell you guys what I look for. I'm sure it's going to be similar in a lot of hiring managers, the themes that I talk about of what we look for. And the order will be different for different places. And so if you can try to figure that out. So for me, number one, I don't care about your technical expertise. I don't care about your skill set. You've done a PhD. You probably have done a residency if you're applying to me. And I know if you're able to get through that, your ability to perform the tasks are probably there. So number one for me is who you are and what's your fit going to be in the department. We have to spend a lot of time at work every day, and I think Courtney kind of mentioned it from the other side. Make sure the department you're going into is one that you're interested in. And for me, when I'm interviewing someone, I want to know they're going to fit in. I'm not going to have issues every day. They're going to be able to talk to clinicians. They're going to be someone that, and this is just an important thing for me, that's going to be engaged in work, but also engaged outside of work, where we're going to go for drinks on a Friday night and hang out after work. And I don't need everybody in the department to do that, but it is a good indicator if I get the sense that you're that person who's going to be planning a ski trip for the team, making life better at work. Any indication I get of that puts people a lot further up. The next thing I'll look for is initiative. And what I mean by that is, have you done things that set yourself apart? Have you gone and done an extra little training course I did a training course in Ethos somewhere. I did a site visit. I've learned about MR Linux, even though that's not my research area. What have you done to set yourself apart that shows me that when you're working at my center, I'm not going to have to knock on your door every day and say, hey, there's an extra thing here, there's an extra thing there. Can you do it? And begrudgingly you do it. I'm looking for people who will take on projects, take on leadership roles, grow through their career, and have demonstrated previously that they're going to go above and beyond. Again, we're physicists. It's not a Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, clock in, clock out job. This is a career path that you're choosing, and I'm really looking for those who will go above and beyond. And then for me at the bottom of the list, and again, I've said why it's at the bottom of the list, but can you do your job? Are you going to be clinically competent in your job? And it's still important, yes, and I'll be able to assess that with simple questions in the interview, mostly with your references. If you've been clinically competent through your residency and you've been able to go through that properly, I know that that will transition into clinical practice. So that's kind of bottom on that list for me. So the last couple things I'll talk about is how we pre-screen applicants. And this is a really hard part of interviewing. You get 10 applicants, and how do you distinguish between them? We can't interview all 10. We're going to pick 5. And so often, it's a very homogenous group. So people that I know before are going to make the cut and at least get the courtesy of an interview. And that's what you want to get. People who, when you write your reference letters, it needs to be personalized to that department. A blanket boilerplate cover letter, if that's all I'm going to get to know you by, it goes into the not interested stack right away, because I need to differentiate. And if you haven't even taken the time to show you know something about my department and that you've done a little bit of due diligence, you know something about what we do and who we are and how you might fit into that and how your skill set will fit us, you'll get pushed into the not interested pile. So make sure you put some effort into that. Again, your CV and the millions of accomplishments, I don't have time to read everybody's CV start to end. So put that stuff in there, but that cover letter becomes really important in distinguishing. And then make sure you have good references as well. One tip someone told me once is, don't just ask for reference letters, ask if they're going to write you a good reference letter, and prod your references a little bit for what they're going to put in there, because these days, every reference letter, everybody is cream of the crop, top 1%, and it's hard to distinguish through reference letters, especially if they're just, yep, they're great, they're excellent, we liked having them. I need specifics about what you did, your initiative, the project. So you might need to help your references write reference letters to get specific. Soft skills during the interview. Really, that's all we're trying to assess during the interview. I think you got a lot of good examples from Logan of like what the type of questions we ask are. Know that when you're in the interview, that the interview started before and it goes till after the interview. So for example, something we do is a chat with my admin about how her interaction was with you. Was it frustrating? Did you hound her? What was that pre-communication like? During the interview, obviously, you've answered your questions. I want to see that you can think on your feet. I'm going to ask you things that you didn't necessarily expect. Then we're going to have you sit and chat with our residents, for example, and um, we want you to let your guard down a little bit and show your personality, because that's what we're trying to figure out if you have it. If you stay locked up and don't show really who you are, for us, you might have stayed professional the whole time, but that's a negative from our perspective. We want to show that you can joke around, you can laugh, you can have a fun time during something that's formal like an interview. And our residents were joking about this. It's the would we want to go hang out with you and have dinner with you? Because we're going to be spending all day with you for the next many years. If I wouldn't even be interested in having dinner with you, then I don't know that I would want to hire you. And then the last thing I'll just mention is once we're done the interview, often it's 5 different people, very gradually varied in terms of their skill sets. It was mentioned already that like sometimes your skill set might not fit, and that's not a knock on you. But how do we decide at the end of the day who we're going to hire? And for me, I struggle sometimes with it because there's a strong tension between who you know, who the safe pick is, and potentially someone you don't know that may bring something new to the table. And it's a risk going to who you don't know that might bring something new that your department doesn't have, because you don't know that person on a daily basis. You haven't met them before, versus like say a resident that we've had, a PhD student who was great and exceptional. And it's a hard decision at the end. And I don't know that I can answer how we finally decide. I know that every hiring manager will have a different way of doing that. For me, knowing someone is extremely important, and as well, a diverse background of experience is very important. And depending on the candidate, depending on who we've hired recently, it will change from application to application. So again, the last thing I'll say is, you as a candidate, you need to figure out what it is a department wants and what it is a department needs, and see whether you fit that. But as well, you can kind of cater your application, cater your interview to that if you're able to figure that out. So that's it. I will end it there, and hopefully we can have a good conversation if you guys have more questions about this.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was very, very engaging, and we love to hear all the tips that you just gave. I am opening the floor for every question that you have. You can unmute yourself if you want to say it out loud, or if you prefer, we can also put some questions on the chat. That being said, I also have a couple of questions that I would like to hear from you guys. And I think that I will start with that one. Okay, so this is tailored for the, let's call it junior physicist. So looking back at your job search, what is one of the things that you wish you have started doing earlier? Like, do you think that probably working on documentation like CV, or as Nathan was mentioning, networking, or probably even talking with people that it was working on that center at the time?
You want to go, Courtney, or I can chime in?
You go ahead and take this one, Logan.
Okay. I don't know that I have anything too specific to say. I feel like Nathan's advice is probably the right advice to take here in terms of like making contacts with people early. And like Nathan said, that can come from conferences. I had good experience with like as a resident, I had a short rotation at another center, and that went a long way actually for the interviews and job search as well, because I already knew those people. There was like mutual interest there. So there's lots of avenues to make those connections, and yeah, I totally agree that like it's just the reality of the world, right? Like if you know someone already and you know they're great, maybe why would you take uh, an educated guess or risk versus the known quantity if on paper they're kind of the same? So yeah, I'll just echo that and say those early contacts are probably the best thing that you can do. The CV and all that, I feel like will come with time. Like yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, in conferences as a student, it can be intimidating to introduce yourself to these professionals in the field who have, mastered the art and have been at it for decades. But those are the exact people you want to introduce yourself to. They can really open up a lot of doors. I wish I had made more of an effort in that regard as a student, but I was fortunate enough to have excellent supervisors who sort of helped me out with that process.
Great. So we have some questions from Cassandra Miller on the chat. So the first one is, do you think that having the first part of the ABR completed makes a difference when you are trying to get hired in a Canadian institution?
I did not do the ABR. I don't have much to comment there, Logan.
Yeah, same here. So I guess maybe we have jobs, so
Mhm.
maybe not too much. But Nathan, maybe you can comment.
Yeah, and I would say that's gonna again vary depending on the hiring manager. My view on it would actually be if I didn't know anything about you and you said, "Hey, I've done part one of the ABR," I'd be like, "Are you wanting to stay in Canada or not?" So I would actually look at that as a potential negative or a neutral. Just because in Canada our route is the CCPM. Yes, ABR is cross-compatible. Yes, I've hired people who've trained in the US, and I think I have 3 ABR certified people here at our center. But I knew them ahead of time, and there were lots of other pieces. I wouldn't, not knowing who you're applying to, or if you haven't met them and know them, I don't care whether you can do part one of the ABR. It's pretty straightforward, and I would hope that if you're that early and you're still getting certified, that you would do the CCPM exam because that's more standard in Canada.
Okay, the second question that we have is actually for Courtney. So do you have any advice for an imaging resident who may be facing no clinical job openings when they graduate, but wants to stay in Canada?
Well, yeah, as I showed on that slide, the opportunities are slim up here. So I think it really pays off to reach out to individuals early on, who you might be interested in working with. The truth is you may want to expand your search. The US has an abundance of opportunities in imaging physics and nuke med, MR. Canada's not a populated area, so the consequence of that is there are very few positions. But if you're committed to staying here, contact these people early on. Introduce yourself. Let them know that you're interested in potentially doing a residency at that institution. I think that's your best approach.
Great. I think that we have some people that wants to ask personal questions. So Steph, you think that you can unmute yourself? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank each of you for sharing your experiences. I'm actually here a little bit early. I'm just coming out of my residency interviews, but I know I'll be applying for a job kind of in no time. So I'm wondering, as I reflect on what worked well and what didn't in these interviews, maybe you can comment on some of the differences you found for yourself between applying for kind of a residency mindset versus applying for your first job.
Logan, you want to take that one as I did the postdoc?
Sorry, my mouse cursor was disappearing. I couldn't find a way to unmute. Yeah, I don't know that I have much of something profound to say here. I feel like it's generally similar. Like I feel like Nathan talked a lot about, I feel people are looking for personalities or people that will fit. Maybe as a resident, like it's a shorter term position, so maybe they're emphasizing a little more on technical skills or like professionalism, things like that, as opposed to like, are you a good fit for our center because it's a different time commitment? Probably Nathan can give a better assessment of that. But beyond that, like, I don't know, knowing people in advance, making those connections, being true to who you are, like trying to showcase your best assets when you're meeting with people. Like I think those are common themes that probably persist from both forums. It's my take.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you.
And I would say right now too, don't worry about those job interviews in 2 years. You are in now. If you get a residency spot now, that is a 2-year job interview, and focus on it and put the effort into it like your job will depend on it, because it really does. So if you spend the next 2 years and excel in your residency, you won't have a problem finding a job in 2 years, and you will have options of where to find. But if things don't go well in your residency, that puts you at a different place. So it's a 2-year job interview beginning now.
Yep, I like that a lot. Thank you so much for your advice.
Great. We have another person. Amir, you think that you can unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yes, hello guys. I really appreciate the presentations that you prepared and the information that you guys shared. I'm coming from the nuclear medicine background, and I'm interested in doing my continuing my profession in in radiotherapy medical physicist. And kind of the challenge that I see goes back to what all of you mentioned, and specifically Nathan, approaching people in advance in conferences and making the connection. But as I'm doing my PhD in nuclear medicine and imaging world, the conferences that I go, they are separated from the radiotherapy world, and I kind of have realized that this is a kind of disadvantage, and I cannot use approaching people and connecting to different people to kind of present myself and have that opportunity. I hope, and I'm hoping that you can kind of offer me an insight. How can I compensate for that and have a bypass for it?
And I would say if you're doing nuke med right now, you are positioning yourself extremely well for the next 5 years. Being on the AAPM organizing committee this year, we have a track for radiopharmaceutical treatments. We have had a lot of abstracts submitted. I'm sure that work you're doing, or you'll find work interesting that's being presented at an AAPM conference. I think in the next 5 years, though, therapeutic radiation oncology and nuclear medicine are going to merge, and the skill set you're developing will become extremely important as we are giving RPT and external beam treatments and trying to figure out the dosimetry and all of that. So I think your skill set will come in handy, and I think you just need to find a way to, again, come to COMP, come to AAPM and present your research. You're going to find a lot of people really interested in it because our field is changing very quickly.
Yeah, a lot of nuke med conferences out there, a lot of great ones. EA&M, SNMMI. I've been to a handful of these. They are almost exclusively nuke med physicists, but like Nathan said, AAPM, COMP, those are very multidisciplinary. You can reach out to all kinds of people across the aisle. But as I said, when I was finishing my master's degree, I was in a similar position. Like, how do I connect to people that I want to work with in the field? I just did a simple Google search, found a dozen different physicists and emailed all of them, just expressing my interest to work with those people. So if you're having trouble connecting at conferences, don't be afraid to just cold call emails. That's an effective approach as well.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the insight.
That sounds perfect. And the other thing that probably I would like to ask is about the CCPM exam. Like, I mean, we have had a talk about the preparation of the exam itself, but how do you felt that it was like a proper timeline for doing the application? Because probably a lot of people, it is trying to put it a little bit behind, I mean, 1 year away, because the first year you are trying to feed on the job, you are trying to learn a little bit more on the job itself, and maybe you are not going to have the time to prepare for it. But I'm seeing that, for example, Logan, you probably just did the CCPM after finishing your residency. So do you advocate into doing something like that, or do you think that taking the time and preparing during the job, it is also a good thing to do?
Probably everyone's experience is going to be a little different, and I don't know what the stipulations of your employer is, or like what your job contract maybe requires you to do, or that's part of your hiring. But I don't know. For me, I was glad to just get it out of the way. Like, I had all the knowledge from when I was a resident. Tried to prep for like as many of the questions and stuff as possible at that time. So I feel like you're coming out of a residency, ideally having passed your residency exam, all of the exams throughout. Like, my experience was that those exams like go in greater detail than the certification exam does. So I think that you're better off just to get through it and finish it at your earliest convenience. That said, it was a very busy first few months getting situated on the job and doing that at the same time. I did have a fortunate experience where my employer did provide some protected time to prep, like especially in the week or 2 weeks before the written exam and the oral exam. Like, it's in their interest that you pass, right? So they want to set you up for success too. So anyway, that was my experience and my take. I'm not sure what the others think.
Yeah, and in BC, our salary structure is such that you're incentivized to do it as soon as you possibly can, because you move from the physicist level that we hire you if you're not certified into a different pay level when you're certified. So we had a few people that hadn't done it, and then as soon as that changed, they did it instantly, and now everyone's doing it as fast as they can. I wish and I hope in the future that CCPM could change the exam timeline and the eligibility such that you could write it right at the end of your residency. I know you don't maybe have as much clinical experience as you would after a year of being a physicist, but in my view, a residency should give you enough clinical experience so that you can be a qualified medical physicist and that you could pass that exam. So I would love to see that change in the future, but we'll see what happens with that.
Okay.
Question is in the chat. Can I quickly address this one?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm in a unique position not having done the residency. CCPM requires 2 years of patient-related experience before you can write the exam. So I just finished my 2 years, and I'm now preparing myself to write. I have a full year timeline that I've developed, for the various aspects of the exam. At the end of the day, your employer can give you some protected time, but it's likely you're going to need to do some of this outside of the work, when in the evenings, come back and do some studying. So yeah, I'm planning on writing it for the next, next spring, I believe. Yeah, so get started early, make a plan, stick to it. You're likely going to have to use some personal time.
Okay, so thank you very much for taking the time to speak for this series seminar. We really enjoy all the insight that you have given us. And we hope to see you around probably in conferences. And I think that that's everything for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Take care.